So after the resurrection, there was one disciple who had killed himself, one of the 12. There were 10 disciples who were faithful, who believed, who didn't have any problems. They were like, this is amazing. And then there was one disciple who just said, I'm struggling with this. Maybe you are part of the 10. I hope you're not part of the one who, just felt such shame and regret that he, killed himself. But you might be that one disciple who you want to believe, but you're having trouble. And there's certain things that you've read on the internet. There's certain people you've talked to. There's certain things that you've heard. There's a lot of questions. It's easy to ask questions, right? People just say, yeah, but what about this? And you feel like, I don't have the answer. This is for you. Some of us go a step deeper, and we're not just having a few questions. We're really reeling. We're living in those questions. It's pretty deep for us. And we're really wrestling with, do I even believe in God? Do I even really believe in Jesus anymore? The Bible, etc., etc. And you may be going through a lot of that. And I want you to know you're not alone, because I have had each of these doubts, and I've had them and I've had different doubts in different phases of my life. And as I got married, I had different doubts about where's God. And as I became a dad, or as we couldn't have children, and I have 2 miracle stories we'll tell you another time. But as we couldn't have children, I had my doubts, and I had anger. And yes, I cussed at God. And actually, God's not that bad with that. He actually can take it. You see that in the Psalms. People, David, they express themselves. And God's like, you know what? I want to hear you more than, oh my gosh, I can't believe you used that word with me. The point is, God wants our authenticity. He wants your whole heart. He doesn't want your behaviors. He only wants your behaviors if they result from your whole heart. So what we're going to do, we're going to start here with the story of Thomas. And I'm going to read this. It says, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where his nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. It's kind of an ultimatum. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then Jesus said to them, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed. Okay, so this is the New International Version. You might be familiar with this story. We're going to look at a couple of other versions so we can go deep into the Greek origin here. So we're going to be looking at the Today's Paternal Frustration version. Then Jesus said to Thomas, for crying out loud, how many times do we need to talk about this? Put your hand here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. We also have the next version, the Dave Bruce version. Then Jesus said to Thomas, seriously? Come on. Fine, whatever. Put your hand here. Put your, here, see my hands, reach out, etc. We've got another version here, the tough love version. You may be into the tough love version. Then Jesus said to Thomas, bro, doubting is wrong. I am going to use this as a teaching moment. You just need to have faith. So I am not going to show you my side of in my hands, and I am not going to say, put your fingers here and see my hands and all that good stuff. And then we have one more version here. This is the gonna go there version. Then Jesus said to Thomas, really? You're gonna go there, Thomas, really? You're gonna go there. You are going to give me an ultimatum. I can't even, right now. You watched me die, and now you are going to challenge me in front of everyone, and unless I cave, you are just going to quit? Dude. But we can feel this way. And I want to also speak to the people who are here, and you're like, I don't have any doubts, but my kids struggle. I spoke with a sister the other day, and we're talking about this. She said she's looking forward to it, and she has children, and she has trouble relating, and I'm like, and she's kind of she's tempted to be the mom to shut it down. But, I told her, listen, just listen. Just listen. We're changing, we're morphing, we get new information all the time. Just listen and be a safe place, and that's probably going to handle 80% of the issues, but we need to be there for each other. The tough love version, amazingly, that's not what Jesus did. And if you remember back to Elisha and Naaman, that's not what Elisha did either. So, I doubt it. The introduction here, we're going to talk about 4 things for the starters here. Acts 15, 1 Peter, we're going to talk about my goal, and we're going to talk about the idea of a museum curator. So first, Acts chapter 15, verse 28. It says, "It seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us not to burden you with anything beyond the following 3 requirements." He's basically saying, we want to have the least amount of things between you and Jesus. We're going to try to remove burdens instead of forcing burdens on you. I know one minister, and he's the German version of Josh McDowell when I was living there. His name is Werner Gitt. And a lot of people know him. He's well known. He's conservative. And I was, reading his material, and I was like, this is good stuff. But then I realized he kind of he forced you to believe in the 6 days of creation, the 24-hour periods, meaning you had to believe in a young earth at 6,000 years old, or else you couldn't believe in the rest of the story. And he kind of made that a barrier or a gate you had to cross through, and I was like, gosh, this is tough. This is really tough, especially for Germans, where you find hardly anybody, in Berlin, where we lived, hardly anybody who actually believes in God or the Bible. Next scripture is 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." He says, give an answer. He doesn't say refute. You don't need to refute people, but you should be able to give an answer. And if you don't have that answer, it puts you in a bad place. You may feel, especially on campus, you're dealing with people all the time who maybe not believe they're smarter than you. In their minds. You're smarter than them in your mind. And, and there's this pride thing is actually what's going on. We just need to give the reason. I believe God changed my life. The Bible did change my life. I do believe Jesus resurrected. I really do. And I believe there's reasons for it, etc., etc. But we don't have to refute everything. Sometimes we take this scripture as the need to refute. My goal for this series, here it is. I want to honor your doubts. This is a safe place to express your doubts. You are not weird, you are not weak, you are not faithless, and you are not alone. It's okay. Now, coming from somebody who's, I was baptized 40 years ago in high school, and I'm 35. How does that happen? And I've had doubts since high school. And all these doubts that you're having, I've probably had them, and I've looked for answers. I found some of them were good, some of them were bad, which leads me to my 4th point, the idea of a museum curator. Now here in this picture we have a museum curator. She is the curator for the Louvre Museum in Paris, and I can't pronounce her name, Marie-Laure Lebercher or something like that. But that is a butchering of my attempt at French. But what she does is she gets art pieces that come in, and they only display maybe 10% or 20% of the art that they have. The rest of it goes into the archives, and it just stays there. They may bring it out. They may, loan it out to another museum, etc., etc. So that's how I see my role. I've collected all these apologetics, which means defenses of the Gospels. Defenses of the gospel for my whole life. Arguments that I thought, now that's a good one. You got liar, lunatic, Lord. That's a good one. That's really hard to, I gotta remember that one. I add that to my museum. I add that to my collection of apologetics. You've got that as well. Maybe you're a curator of a playlist. So maybe it's not that, you've got, how many of you have your own playlists that are yours? And how many of you are kind of proud if somebody were to ask, hey, that's a great playlist. Could you share that with me? I mean, when that happens, you're like, you had some good music here. You kind of are excited. And then you keep adding to the playlist, and then you're like, I heard that song way too many times now. I'm just going to, you remove it from your playlist. So this is just a random JPEG from a playlist. Not mine. All right. So what we're going to do is, in the next few minutes, I'm going to go through the topics for you, and I'm going to ask you to get out your phone. I want you to go to your email account, and I want you to send an email to faithdoubts@gmail.com. I tried to get smarter than you at gmail.com. It was already taken. That's my joke. All right, yeah, okay. So I'm going to talk now through a lot of the agenda items. We're going to go fast because I want to get to the actual topic that we're going to be talking about today in this very first lesson. So if you have any questions, if you have anything you want me to discuss, anything that's important to you that's on your heart, get out your phone, faithdoubts@gmail.com, write me an email, try to make it legible. I know our handwriting can be, all right, one above your head. All right, so first item here, the 4 stages of faith. This is what we're going to be talking about in today's meeting. The second item is making sense of it all. We're going to be doing that 2 weeks from now. A lot of the problem that we face is that things just stop making sense. They don't make sense anymore. I believe a lot of it. I don't believe all of it. It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I don't understand the flood thing. Methuselah, and we start getting messed up. Next, we're going to talk about contextual, whatever that was. I can go back to it. What was it? Cultural contextualization. All right, cultural contextualization. That has to do with the idea that we all see things from our worldview. If you grew up in Alabama, you might have a different worldview than if you grew up in San Francisco or in Bombay or in Shanghai. Principles of interpretation, big topic, we'll be talking about that. Translators and translations. What is morality? Approaches to the Bible. My personal starting point, when you get to that point where you're like, I don't even know what to do anymore? You kind of need a personal starting point where you go, all right, I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to slowly build up my faith again until I know that I'm not crazy, that I actually do believe what I believe. And sometimes you just need that starting point. I tell you what mine is. And it's changed over the years. Spiral dynamics. How many of you have ever heard of spiral dynamics? Just raise your hand. Awesome. You are the blessed few. You are the chosen ones. No, this is the concept this is the paradigm that rocked my world more than anything else in the last 15 years. When I learned this, I sat back and I was like, okay, what's so special about this? And the more life went on, I was like, oh my gosh, this really explains a lot. And I want you to understand it. It'll help you to understand you. It'll help you to understand other people and why we struggle. The Eastern versus the Western mindset. We are in the Western mindset. And in the Eastern mindset, you may think that the Western mindset is correct, but actually it's the Eastern mindset that the Bible authors wrote out of. Bible math versus unfolding. Let's see, Genesis 6 plus 1 Peter 3 equals this doctrine. Acts chapter 2 plus Romans 6. And so you have Bible math. And it's not we have it, every church has it. There's also a concept called unfolding, where God is revealing and unfolding reality for us over time. Irresistible. This is a book by Andy Stanley that also rocked my world. This is absolutely an amazing concept here. I'll explain it to you and we'll talk about it. Everything is spiritual, not just the things that are obviously spiritual. Language and idioms. How many of you speak multiple languages? Okay, a chunk of us. If you don't speak multiple languages, it's easy for you, well, it's difficult for you to understand that whole translation thing. It's difficult for you to understand, but when you try to translate Spanish into English, and you're trying to go, well, wait a second. Or in Matthew 6:33, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, but in the Spanish translation, it's seek first his kingdom and his justice, and you're like, what? Justice, righteousness, what do I do with that Greek word, etc. Something big happened in the first century. That's part of my starting point. The sin of certainty, because we're changing, and if you'll admit it, you probably think differently than you even did 2 years ago on certain topics. And if you're humble, you'll realize I'm thinking differently than I'm going to think in 2 years, or in 5 years, or in 10 years. Science versus the Bible, archaeology. What is the Bible? I got to go to Israel several times, by the way. There's some pretty cool, I was at several places where there's some really interesting archaeology that has been uncovered. So there's some good evidence there, and there's interesting stuff. And finally, led by the Spirit. What that means is, let's figure it out. But I have dozens and dozens of lessons, and you know, these are just the topics. But there's a lot of lessons on a lot, even other things that we didn't even mention here, that we're going to be getting into, because we're going to be doing a class on Sunday afternoons. Probably, we'll figure it out, every other Sunday, something like that. I'll work with Steve on that to go through these other classes. So the first class that we're going to be doing, the first lesson today is a lesson called The 4 Stages of Faith. So episode 1, The 4 Stages of Faith. We're going to start here with spiral dynamics. So remember I told you spiral dynamics is pretty awesome? Well, if you look at this, you'll be confused. It's a bunch of colors and a bunch of layers, and the layers are not numbered. You don't go from one layer to the other, because all layers, no layer is better than another layer. So sometimes we go through this thing and we think, well, I'm better than you. I used to think like you. You're so simple. But I've learned stuff, and I'm smart. And you know, you aren't really applying yourself. So spiral dynamics was developed by Claire Graves and Don Beck as a holistic model of human growth and awareness and values over time. And it applies to cultures as well as individual people. Okay? And the 4 stages of faith basically is a streamlined version of spiral dynamics. So what we've got here in the discussion today, we're going to take spiral dynamics and we're going to bring it down very simple. There's even a simpler way of bringing it down, but that's not going to address where we're at today. So it's got these colors, it's got these layers, all that good stuff. So today, the 4 stages of faith, and the first stage is simplicity. So simplicity, it all rhymes. Simplicity is, we'll get into. The second layer is complexity. The third layer is perplexity. That's the one we're going to focus on. That's the one that causes us trouble. That's the one where we're like, I don't know if I can stay a Christian. I don't know if I can stay in church. I don't know if I believe whatever I believe anymore. And then the 4th stage is harmony, where you've worked your way through the perplexity and you're good with the tension. Okay, so stage number 1, actually we're going to start at stage number 0. So with stage 0 here, this is the egocentric. So this is, let's say, before you got baptized, or before you became a Christian, or before you even tried. So this is where God is a genie, there's a magic lamp, you know, God is like Santa Claus for you. So you've got this magical kind of God relationship. It's a little bit like magic, a little bit like karma, and that's kind of what's going on. Then the idea of what's the moral question that you're dealing with? Well, the moral question is, does it feel good to me? Or does it feel bad to me? That's the moral question. That's where my morals are at when I'm at stage 0. And then the 3rd stage, my connections. My connections are completely based on me and my needs. If you meet my needs, we can connect. And if you don't, I got to go. Simplicity is our next layer here, our next stage. Stage number 1, that's a 1 on the right side of the screen. People tell me they couldn't see that. But anyway, it's a 1. And simplicity is really highlighted by the concept of dualism, A versus B, black versus white, etc. And clarity is a very important concept here. We're going to look at a bunch of aspects now, and we're going to look at these same aspects, these 8 aspects for all 4 of these stages. So the first stage is authority, and I wish I had brought my reading glasses because I really can't read this small. This is actually a little bit more readable here. Authority. God is the ultimate authority. So when it comes to authority, Stage number one, that's really what it's about. There's authority figures. There's authority, people of authority in my life. My parents are my initial authority. There's teachers. And I need to stay in line. And if I follow the authority, everything's going to be just fine. The next thing is knowledge. Knowledge is clear. When you are in this simplicity, hey, everything's fine. It's black and white. It's clear. There's saved, there's lost. There's the things in the Bible, really, there's no problems. I don't see any problems with the Bible. The Bible has, is completely clear to me, and that's fine. That's good. Dualism is big. Right versus wrong, good versus bad. You're either in or you're out. You're for us or you're against us. And that's the problem with simplicity, is that it can be too much that I believe this now, this is good, therefore if you believe something different, that's bad. You are bad, and you need to become good. It's not you need to work on things, but no, you're bad, or I'm bad and I need to become good. Very black and white. Life is a war. Okay? So life is a war. It's a battle. We need to win. The believers. So 90% or 80%, whatever it is, some good portion of believers in all churches. I'm not talking, by the way, this is not about the ICOC. This is everybody. People in Christianity throughout the United States, about 80 to 90% are in this category of stage one simplicity. People are busy. They got a lot to do, got a lot to work on. Life is busy. I got my kids. I got my job. Let me just keep it simple. And oh my gosh, you want me to have a quiet time on top of that? Well, that's already kind of pushing and come to church every. That's okay. Now we're pushing. I don't have much left. So that's kind of where people are at. The identity. The identity is found in the leader or the group. So instead of, and we're not talking the leader being Jesus. We're talking the leader often being the minister, okay? And the group kind of being, this is what's important to me. And this layer does need to develop and understand that, yeah, it's good to get our identity in Jesus, but not necessarily in my leaders. They're helpful, but we can move on. So strengths. They're highly committed. They're willing to sacrifice. Okay, so that's good. Weaknesses. Sometimes they're realizing that other people need to be committed, and so they're willing to inflict that same suffering that they will take themselves. I'll suffer for the cause, and so I don't mind you suffering for the cause. In fact, I don't mind having some confrontation with you. So it can become a challenge with this, and people in simplicity, we can think, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Actually, I'll mention it later, 99% of mankind has been living in simplicity, and it's just fine. Simplicity is not bad. People had lives that they would, die when they're 40 years old. The average lifespan was pretty short through most of history. Most people lived in simplicity. You became a grandparent at the age of 40 or in your 30s, 35, grandparents. The elders, church elders, were in their 40s, late 30s. So a different concept than what we have. So the next thing here is complexity. So complexity is all about being pragmatic. That means what works or what doesn't work, all right? And so we're going to look at the aspects here. Clicker, slide. Aspect number one, authority. So God's ultimate guide, or God is the ultimate guide or coach. So we don't see God here totally as the authority so much. We actually build a relationship with God. There's a loving relationship, and it's not just about authority, but we still see authority as a good thing. Knowledge. We don't believe everything is knowable, but we believe most things are knowable, and we probably know them, and we believe the Bible is a bit more complicated than we thought, but still pretty easy to understand. Pragmatic. This is the big key. What works or what doesn't work? And we'll get to that in a minute, why that's important. What's effective, what's not effective, what's successful or not. Life is much more complicated than I thought. So you are getting into the complicated, items here. Believers, we're looking at, between stage one and stage two, you're looking at 90% of most people who go to church or who are believers in the United States. Okay? So again, not ICOC, all Christian religions. Our identity is my cause and my alignment, okay, or my achievement. Strengths are enthusiasm, idealism, and action. The weaknesses are, it could be considered superficial or naive or overly pragmatic, sometimes a little bit too pragmatic. And here's the interesting thing, okay? Pastors have trouble with, we got to give grace to Steve and Carrie as they lead the church here, because pastors have trouble with leading a church where you've got some people that are just fine being in simplicity, and that's not wrong. And some people who are in complexity, and that's fine. And then you've got people over here that are in perplexity and harmony, and the pastor's trying to do his best to meet all the needs and to make sure everyone's just following Jesus, living like a disciple, growing in their faith, and everybody's but like, if you were to really meet my needs, you would do it this way. How come you're not meeting my needs? And guys, I just want us to know, we need to have grace for our ministers. It's super difficult to lead churches that are across all of these different things here. Typically what happens in complexity is that, what it says here at the bottom is that people will come up with their questions, and to be pragmatic, the minister, and I've done this, will say, you know what, we don't know exactly what happens after life. After we die. I think we kind of know heaven and hell, and we kind of exactly how it works, and and the whole end times. I don't know. Is Jesus coming back today, or is he coming back next year? 1,000. Those are all great questions, bro. I'd appreciate it though if you just focused on what is important, which we know is love God, love people, love the lost, love each other, have quiet times, serve, give, and that is satisfying for a lot of people. That response. And that's a good response. It satisfied me for many years, but there comes a point where you're no longer really satisfied with that, and that is the level of perplexity. That's where you're not quite ready yet, and that's where a lot of people go into what's called deconstruction. Okay, that's that magic D word, deconstruction. Not to be confused with destruction, although a lot of people do assume it's the same thing. So here, let's look at the aspects of this one. Number one, authority. Authorities for perplexity now. Wait a second, this is harder than it. Authorities are the enemy. So now you're in perplexity and you're like, I'm not trusting these people. Authority is the enemy. Authority's out to get me. I'm not so sure I like this authority thing. Knowledge. Few things are actually knowable. I can only actually know a few things. So what can I know? And you're in this state of confusion because all the stuff you thought you knew all of a sudden is falling apart, and you're having to face questions either internally or externally that you're not sure how to deal with. But what is relevant to you is authenticity. That's what you're all about if you're in perplexity. I just want to be real. I want to look at all the facts. Let's keep it honest. Let's keep it real. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't tell me a lie. Don't bait and switch. I want to know the real facts. Let's just be straightforward and honest with each other. That is highly valued, really, among the young generation. Probably most people who are 25 years old and younger are living right there, and maybe even us old folks as well. That whole idea of, I want authenticity, I've got to be real, and that's a challenge for us at times. Perplexity. What is the life? The life is very gray. It's not black and white. It's fuzzy. What do I do? There's a song that I love, basically where the singer says, nothing, I can't quote it anymore, I don't have it, but basically that when I was sober, everything was fuzzy, and right now, or everything was clear, and now things aren't so clear anymore. So am I sober anymore? So it's that kind of a concept. So believers. There's only a couple of believers. 5 to 10% of believers across all churches are this way, okay? Few churches Hardly any churches cater to the perplexed. I'll just tell you that. If you're perplexed and you're like, I'm going to go find another church that really deals with this, good luck. Good luck. Tell me when you found them. They're hard to find. Identity, can I even read this here? Is found in solitude, all right? Strengths, strengths are, I can't even read anymore. Does anybody have reading glasses I can borrow? I left mine at home. Depth. Depth and honesty. There we go. Thank you. Oh yeah, depth, honesty, sensitivity to suffering, and perhaps ironic humor. And they also say the ability, it's an eye, it affects your eyes. The weaknesses, cynical, uncommitted, withdrawn, critical, depressed, and elitist. Right? So that's why you have the left saying to the right, oh my gosh, you're so judgmental. And maybe the right is very judgmental. I would agree with that. I think the right is judgmental. But then you got the left being judgmental back, but feeling better about it. And you have both sides saying, we're not judgmental. The other side is judgmental. So that's perplexity. Moving on. Oh yeah, the pastor's approach. Pastor's approach. Bro, I love you, but I'm going to have to ask you to stop talking about your doubts with others because you're hurting their faith. Otherwise, it'd be best for you to find another congregation. So that's kind of where the minister is stuck. If he's not wise and he doesn't know what to do, but he doesn't want to lose the whole flock to Johnny, who's got all his questions and doesn't believe in hell anymore, okay, what can we do? So it's a challenge for these ministers. Step number 4, love rules rules. I was going to say love trumps rules, but I changed it to love rules rules, aka humility. Okay? Authority. Authorities are imperfect like me, sometimes doing their best, and at times dishonest, and at times misguided. So there's no longer authorities are evil. There's kind of like, you know what? They're trying their best. Some of them obviously are not trying their best. That becomes pretty clear. But people are trying, and we're going to honor the effort that we see. The next is knowledge. I won't know all the answers. Some things are known, many are mysteries. The Bible isn't perfect, and that's okay. Oh, now you just heard me say, yeah, the Bible's not infallible. Right here, these people are basically saying, yeah, the Bible's not infallible. Oh my gosh, you're saying there might be some things that disagree? Yes, I'll just say it. Matthew says there's 2 demoniacs. Mark says there's 1 demoniac. Which one's right? There are things in the Bible that don't agree with each other. But you can also say the Bible is perfect and doesn't have any contradictions because Mark wrote what Mark wrote and Matthew wrote what Matthew wrote. And there's an answer, by the way, to this question. I used to struggle with this exact question. In episode 16, we'll be dealing... No, it's coming up soon. We'll explain that one. Tension ability. This is what's important here. Tension. Answers versus trust. I may not have all the answers, but I do have trust. Love versus rules. There is no them or no other. You know when we're othering people? Harmony stops othering people. And then there's patience with everyone. So you're able to live in the tension, like what we talked about with Elisha and Naaman. You're able to accept the fact that, you know what, this answer isn't exactly what I don't know totally what to do with this. I do know there's God. I do know Jesus resurrected. I do know that I need to love people. You can simplify it, and I'm not saying run away from the questions and ignore them. You can still look for answers. Life. Life is a quest to follow the one new commandment. The one new commandment is John 13, 34 and 35, where he says, listen, I give you a new commandment. Sure, there's 613 or 611, depending on how you count, commandments in the Old Testament. I'm going to give you one new one. Yeah, there was 2 that were the greatest. We're even putting those aside. I'm going to give you one new one. Love one another. Yeah, but that doesn't say to love God. I tell you what, if you love one another, God's going to feel your love. God's going to feel your love. If somebody says, I love you, Mark, and yet they're talking bad about my kids, that's tough. If you love me, love my kids. Believers. The percentage of believers, I had to change this around. Honestly, I wanted to say like less than 3%, but it's less than 5% of people who are kind of in this stage and are still following Christ and still trying to live like disciples. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot of people who they consider themselves that they're in this stage, and yet they aren't living the life and giving. They're kind of isolated in their own little worlds. That's not what we're talking about here. If you're still living isolated and you're not living the body life of Christ and living out what it means to be a Christian on a daily basis, then you're not really in harmony. You're still trying to figure it out, and you may be in the perplexity stage. Your identity for this stage is in bearing the image of God, and God who says in Luke 15, "You are always with me, and everything I have is yours." That's what the Father said to the Son in Luke 15, to the older son. And you can live in that. You know what? I'm a mess. And if we all got up here and confessed with this, this brother who is super humble and read, and I mean, honestly, we could, each one of us, do our story, and it would be, and it could even be humiliating if we were to really share everything. We've all got our skeletons, we've all got our junk, and we can all say, though, that God is always with us, and everything that God has is mine. The strengths is stability, endurance, wisdom, and grace, and everything can be handled by one question. The one question is, what does love require of me? That's the one question that handles it all. What would Jesus do is nice. It's hard to get that into your, what would he really do? Sometimes it's tough. What would he do? Because he did stuff that was surprising. He was considered a glutton. He was considered a drunkard. He went to parties. He hung out with people who were sinners. There was prostitutes who he spent time with. And we would say, I don't think Jesus would do that. Well, he did. So he wouldn't be a good moral conservative maybe in our day and age. But he was Jesus. And then the weaknesses. We may display the weaknesses of the earlier stages, okay? Kind of straightforward there. The pastor's typical approach. Now the pastor's really in trouble here, because you kind of are growing and doing you're kind of advancing here. So the pastor, and I'm not saying any of this about Steve. I'm just saying this is what all pastors in all churches have to deal with. Bro, I love you. I trust you, but I'm not sure how to lead a group of people that includes people in all 4 stages of their faith. It's hard. We may not be able to provide you what you want, so please be prudent about how much you say, or maybe find a church that fits you. Reality is, there's very few churches that will actually fit that. I'll just say there's only one church, there's only one minister I know that I can name some ministers who stopped leading churches, big churches, we're talking mega churches, they stopped leading them because they couldn't handle all of that. So they went to kind of a podcast church and public speaking church. But there's no fellowship that they're building where people are loving each other. And so, but I'm talking about, there's only one minister who I know that's actually trying to build a church that's in all 4 stages. Now I'm not talking, besides Steve. Steve wants to, and we're talking about this stuff because it's not easy. But what I'm saying is, somebody who's well known as a minister out there, there's only one guy I can think of who's actually trying this, and you can hear it in their teaching. You can hear it on Sundays. And it's a challenge because it's really hard to do. And you can't really lead people that are beyond you and where you're coming from. So, what are some observations about stage 1? Now, stage 1 is this simplicity thing, okay? And some of you, you just got to guard your heart right now, because you're going to be saying, you know what, I'm so far beyond these people. If they would really spend some time studying the Bible, they'd already be in complexity or perplexity like me, or harmony if they were really where I am. Reality is 99% of history across the planet was simplicity. 99% of people over time, people died young, Their life was busy. You had a lot of kids. You didn't have birth control. You had a bunch of kids. And you got little Joey running around, and he doesn't need a whole lot of, how you feeling, Joey? He just needs a swat and move on because Sally over there is about to eat the Jell-O, and et cetera, et cetera. And you got the cows need to be, milked, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked for them. And the beautiful thing about the cross and the story of Jesus, it works for all the stages. It works for everyone. Because you can't deny Jesus loved me, he died for me, and he wants me to live the way he did. Very simple paradigm that works for all the stages. Literacy, 11% in Europe in the year 1500. Literacy was extremely rare, mostly just wealthy people, and I'm talking wealthy men. Access to books was rare. Synagogues were lucky to have one scroll. You know what it says? He went to a synagogue and he opened it to the book of Isaiah. Well, that's because they had the scroll of Isaiah there. They didn't have like a whole collection. Well, pull out the Jonah scroll. No, that's not how it worked. They were lucky they would visit different synagogues and they might have other scrolls there. People were grandparents when they were young. They were parents by the age of 15, typically. I mean, there was no birth control. You got married to someone your parents picked. You had babies at a young age. You became a grandparent at age 35 or 40 or whatever. Information came verbally from your parents, your peers, your priests, your village elders, your travelers, etc. So authority figures is where you learned everything. You didn't have an internet to go to. You didn't have a lot of questions. You didn't have a whole lot that was going to make you doubt except for your own philosophy and staring at the stars at night. Families were like tribes. Families were like businesses. There was a lot of kids. Marriage was arranged. There wasn't romance. Just, people didn't date back in the day. I have one of my business partners in India. He had an arranged marriage a couple of years ago. His brother just had an arranged marriage like 3 months ago. His brother just got married. So arranged marriages are still commonplace around the world. You may think that's really weird, but America is just a tiny slice of this planet. And the Western Europe, same thing. There were high mortality rates for infants and for mothers. Life was short, life was busy. People had little energy and little attention to be able to seek the deeper truths that you're so proud of, that you figured out. I got this question about this thing in the Bible, and wait a second, if they did that in the Old Testament, and wait a second here. They didn't have time to think about that. They needed God in their life. They needed answers. They needed terrain. Observations in general about this. Pastors, it's nearly impossible to find examples of churches that help people in all 4 stages. Leaders can seldom lead people in a stage beyond their own. Reality is, a lot of leaders are stuck in simplicity or stuck in complexity. And if they're in perplexity, they might stop leading. They might give up. They might not have people to go to themselves, or they might be so ashamed, I ought to have the answers. And if I'm struggling with my faith, ministers don't struggle with their faith. Ministers don't say, I don't know if I believe in God today. Ministers shouldn't do that. I need to get out of the ministry. That's what happens quite a bit. Three-nagers. What's a three-nager? A three-nager is somebody in stage 3. So stage 3 is tough on everybody, both the leaders and the followers. So you're not the only one struggling because the minister isn't addressing your needs right now. I am really trying to with this whole series of classes. And I will guarantee I will address every question that you may have. I can't guarantee I'll answer all your questions. I can try, and I probably will be able to answer a good chunk of them, okay, just because I've answered them for myself. I'm not saying I can even persuade you, and I'm not even trying to persuade you. I want you to know that faith in Jesus is not magic. It's not magical. You're not checking out your brain. You're not an idiot, okay, and you may feel like you are called that at times. Jesus models working with people in each stage, and he always brings them farther on their journey. So Jesus was really good at dealing with people. I mean, you might even go, Nicodemus was kind of in some perplexity. He didn't know what to do. He didn't feel like a part of the whole Sanhedrin anymore. He's kind of like, gosh, I got to come to you at night because those people are going to, I'm not really a part of them, but I'm not really a part of you. Jesus dealt with people at all kinds of stages in their faith. John the Baptist struggled. things didn't make sense for him. If you haven't read Matthew 11, read Matthew 11 about John the Baptist. Jesus' method aimed to observe and explore Jesus as a teacher, not just in content, but also in his method. So one thing I want to point you to, a practical for you, if you're going through all this, take a look at Jesus and look at how Jesus worked. Look at how he dealt with people. Look at why did he hug the cripple, or why did he touch people when he healed them? Why did he do this stuff? Why did he not do miracles the same way? Why were they always slightly different, etc., etc.? Observe him. You're going to learn a lot by observing this Jesus, not just in what he says, but how he lives. He never gets ticked off at the people who are interrupting him. He's interrupted almost every single story. You go to the paragraphs, there's a paragraph header, Jesus encounters blind Bartimaeus. Well, what happens there is he's on his way doing something, he gets interrupted. He gets interrupted. How do you feel when you're interrupted? The apostles were like, guys, let's blind Bartimaeus, you stand on over here. We're gonna, we'll come back to you later. Jesus is so important, he needs to get on his way. And in every one of these scenarios, Jesus somehow is willing to stop and meet the needs and talk and listen and do the thing that we kind of don't expect him to do. Finally, patience and grace. You are in the midst of a process. Be patient with yourself and with the pastors around you as well. Have grace with those who may not yet have eyes to see, meaning those who are not quite as advanced as you. Communicating with people in different stages, all right? So, a couple of things. Number one, we have Matthew 7, verse 6. And at the bottom, you see here the common sense calculator on the left and the Jesus alignment calculator on the right. They don't add up to 100%, by the way. Somebody said, wait a second, they don't add up to 100. No. They're just, the alignment, and it means nothing. There's no percentage here. That makes sense. All right, Matthew 7, 6. Do not give what is holy to the dogs. They will only turn and attack you. Do not throw your pearls in front of pigs. They will only trample them underfoot. So this is you. Sometimes you're trying to force onto your parents, I am so enlightened, Father. If you only were as enlightened as I am, you would see that XYZ is true and that politician ABC is of the devil, whatever, okay? So when dogs are hungry, they don't value candlesticks made of gold. They just want food. And you're throwing pearls before swine. You're throwing something of value, and you're wondering why they don't appreciate it. That's not what doesn't meet their need. Hungry pigs aren't feeling how deeply you sacrificed as you tossed them grandma's pearl necklace. I really am giving up a lot for you if you only knew what I'm sacrificing. They don't get it. They don't get it. So let's not go into battle. 2 Timothy 2 says, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, be able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. This passage describes Jesus. If you look at how he dealt with difficult people, he rarely yells at them. He often asks them questions, but he doesn't quarrel. Winning is not one of Jesus' frequently discussed attributes. Jesus was a winner. He was a winner. Let's be winners. Winning was not his thing. His thing was connecting, loving, listening. If you love somebody, set them free by entrusting them to the Lord. You don't have to control your children. They know you love them. Listen to them. Set them free doesn't mean you don't try to influence them, but they're probably going to feel a lot more love from you and willingness to be open and discuss what they're really feeling if you listen and if you ask questions and if you really try to understand why. What is it? Why is it that you think that this guy is such a great, what do you like about this guy, etc., etc. So that's it for today. We have the email address here. Thanks so much for paying attention. Thanks for your time. And we have a couple of minutes, not many, but we have how many minutes? A good 5 minutes for some Q&A. We're going to be back in 2 weeks with our next lesson about the story and making sense of it all. That's really once you get that, that'll also really help you in understanding why your brain is fighting so much to get this all understood. So Q&A right now, a couple of minutes of Q&A. Are there any questions out there that where I can give you the right answer? Nick?
Which category do you put yourself in?
I'm in stage 5. I would say I'm somewhere between a 3 and a 4. I don't want to be so arrogant to say that I'm a 4. I would say I have, I left category 2 years ago. I mean, a number of years ago. I've been in category 2. I probably skipped through 1 and was just in category 2 for a long time. And I got a lot of help from a lot of people. But still, things come up. I'm a thinker, and I'm very meticulous. And one little one little question can really throw me off and screw me up. And I've had a good sparring partner in Tim Priestley, who is a very good listener. So I would say that's kind of where I'm at, I think. Ron?
What's a great resource for questions? Because nowadays we can kind of confirm what we already believe. Say if you have a question, you go to Google, and you can have articles that have different answers depending on what your source is. So what would you say is the best point of reference?
I was going to say markshaw.com, but that's not, there is no such thing. There's a lot of good resources and a lot of bad resources. The problem that we have today is TMI. There's just too much. Where I have a whole lesson on this, on the idea of we're drinking from a fire hose, and you can Google something, some topic, and you're going to find a whole bunch of different concepts on it. Chuka Googled something, found something, made sense to him. He sent it to me, and I'm like, I don't really see it that way. I see it differently. But it was fine, and so it's hard to say there's one good set of resources. I would say honestly, if you're starting out, Doug Jacoby is probably the best starting point. I trust him the most. He's helped me the most since I was a young Christian back in the early 80s. Okay, so I would say that's probably the best resource. And he has a lot of books that cover a bunch of topics, and he has books that are like Q&A. What do you think about this topic? And he'll give you, he'll answer that specific question. And he tries to be respectful and honoring. His tone is generally a respectful one. Sometimes he may be stronger than I would be on a topic, but that's fine. We're all trying to be like Jesus, and he is, doing his best to follow Jesus. I know him well. So. Oscar.
I'm just going to plug in. You know John Oakes?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a website. It's really good for questions. It's called
Yeah.
Evidence for Christianity. I go there all the time for stuff, random questions.
Yeah.
Really good one. He has Douglas Jacoby in there all the time.
Yeah. John's a good guy. I know him as well, and he's a great resource as well. I will say that no, I'm going to leave it at that. He's a good resource too. I have to use the men's room?
Yeah, that's a statement.
Okay.
Now here's the question.
Okay.
Brian, I started a great round of applause for you.
Oh. Thank you. Okay. Good luck. All right. Anyone else? Steve. Oh, the demoniacs. Okay, I'll give you one quick on that, although I do have a slide on that. The thing is, it was probably 2 demoniacs, and yet the storytellers, and as you see this, you're going to see Mark was trying to tell a narrative, and he does so very well. So Mark's just not writing, his thoughts down. Mark is actually very distinct and trying to be very clear about everything he is writing. Okay, so his point is clarity and speed. He is what you call the gospel, the snapshot gospel. So you have a short snapshot. It's almost like he's the TikTok gospel. How about that? Under 60 seconds. Each one of his stories is under 60 seconds. You can read it, you can be changed with a quick story. Whereas Luke Luke has, really takes his time. Matthew takes a lot more time, and Matthew's very oriented towards the Jewish mindset. Mark is more for the Roman mindset, which is quick and factual. And so the point is, Mark's not even he's not trying to say there wasn't two. He's just saying, let's keep this story simple, and we're going to talk about one of them. It seems to me like there was two demoniacs. One was the main demoniac, and the other was the assistant to the regional manager demoniac. Anyone else? That's it? Okay, Chuka, one last one.
Can you explain what spiral dynamics mean in layman's terms?
No. I have a whole class on it. I really can't. It's way too complex, and it's a whole class that I'll be doing, probably 2 or 3 classes. So thank you for that question. And again, FaithDoubts. Here we go. FaithDoubts is the email address that you can send your questions into. I'm going to try to, get it all, organized so I can really address your questions and group them together and make sure we're addressing these things. Thank you, guys.
Guys, give it up for Mark. Amen. What a blessing to have Mark Shaw. Mark and Karen back in the 90s led the church in Berlin. And he has been a student of the Bible for many, many years. And it's just awesome to have brothers in the Lord that dig in deep and ask all kinds of questions. And that's what we have. We have a family filled with resources. So thank you, Mark. We look forward to the next class and all the questions that come out as we cycle through the various stages of our own faith development. Amen. Let's close out with a prayer, and you're dismissed for tonight. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this special evening to question and ask the deep things that sometimes make us doubt, to understand the 4 stages of simplicity and complexity and perplexity. And Father, we want to arrive at a place of harmony amidst all the difficult questions that exist in this world. Father, we trust you, we love you, and we thank you. Be with each of us tonight, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for coming tonight. You're dismissed.